Have you ever noticed that some people, the moment life starts to feel overwhelming, immediately start cleaning? They reorganize their kitchen, rearrange their desk, or suddenly decide the closet needs to be completely redone. And then there are others who, under that exact same pressure, can't even think about touching the pile of clothes on the chair. Same stress, completely opposite reactions. That difference isn't random, it's psychological. And once you understand it, you'll never look at a messy or a freshly cleaned room the same way again. Here's something worth sitting with. The urge to organize is rarely really about the mess. More often, it's about control. When life starts throwing things at us that we didn't plan for, our brains instinctively look for something they can manage. And your environment is one of the few things that actually responds when you try to shape it. You move a pile, it moves. You clear a counter, it stays clear. In a world that often doesn't cooperate, that kind of feedback is deeply satisfying. Research in environmental psychology backs this up. People who feel a low sense of control in their lives tend to gravitate toward organizing their physical spaces as a way to restore that feeling. It's not avoidance, it's a coping strategy. And for a lot of people, it genuinely works. Think about the last time something in your life felt really unstable. Maybe you didn't know what to do next. Maybe the problem was too big to solve all at once, and so you did the dishes, or you folded the laundry, or you wiped down the kitchen counter, even though nobody asked you to. That wasn't procrastination, not entirely. Small, completable tasks give the brain something it desperately craves when big problems loom: a sense of movement. Psychologists refer to this as behavioral activation, the idea that taking small, concrete actions can interrupt feelings of helplessness and anxiety. When everything else feels out of reach, making the bed is something you can finish in 3 minutes. And finishing something matters more than we realize. And there's a reason finishing feels so good. When you complete a task, even a small one like clearing off your nightstand, your brain releases a small hit of dopamine. That's the same neurotransmitter involved in motivation, reward, and mood regulation. It's not imaginary, it's chemistry. On top of that, cleaning and organizing often involve rhythmic, repetitive physical movement. Research from the University of British Columbia found that repetitive actions can actually reduce anxiety by engaging the brain's motor system and quieting some of the mental noise. The motion itself, sorting, folding, wiping, has a calming effect that's similar to what happens during light exercise or even certain forms of breath work. Your body knows something your mind sometimes forgets. Movement is medicine. Beyond the chemistry, there's something equally powerful happening on a psychological level when you organize. It creates visible proof of progress. When you're dealing with something in life that has no clear finish line, the lack of visible progress can be quietly devastating. But organizing gives you a before and after that you can actually see. That pile of papers? Gone. That chaotic drawer? Now it makes sense. Neuroscientists have found that the brain responds to visual completion in a meaningful way. Seeing order where there was once disorder gives us a measurable sense of accomplishment. It's a small win, yes. But small wins compound. And sometimes, one cleared off surface is enough to make you believe the bigger things are manageable too. Clutter, on the other hand, does something very different to the brain. A landmark study from the UCLA Center on Everyday Lives of Families found that people, women in particular, showed elevated cortisol levels, the body's primary stress hormone, in direct correlation to how cluttered their homes were. More stuff, more stress. It wasn't just psychological discomfort, it was a measurable physiological response. And there's an evolutionary reason for this. Our brains are wired to scan for threats in our environment. Clutter creates a kind of low-grade visual noise that the brain continuously processes even when you're not consciously aware of it. That pile of unopened mail on the counter? Your nervous system hasn't forgotten about it. It's still watching it. And then clutter starts to compound with something called decision fatigue. Every item in your space is in some subtle way a micro decision waiting to happen. What do I do with this? Where does this belong? Should I keep this? The more objects competing for your attention, the more your decision-making capacity gets quietly drained. This is why Nobel Prize-winning psychologist Daniel Kahneman's work on cognitive load feels so relevant here. Our brains have a limited bandwidth for decision making. When that bandwidth is eaten up by visual clutter, everything else gets harder. The mess isn't just on the desk, it's in your head, which is exactly why organizing can function as emotional regulation. Creating order around you creates a little more room inside you. But organizing isn't only reactive, it's also expressive. The way someone arranges their home tells you something real about who they are. The person who lines their books by color isn't just being aesthetic. They might be someone who finds beauty in visual harmony, who needs their environment to feel curated to feel calm. The person who organizes by category and function over appearance might be someone deeply driven by efficiency and practicality. Interior designers and environmental psychologists both agree. The way we arrange our spaces reflects our values, our identities, and sometimes our aspirations, the version of ourselves we're trying to become. Your space is, in many ways, a self portrait, and for some people, the act of organizing becomes a kind of meditation. When you're fully engaged in a repetitive, focused task with clear sensory feedback, your brain can enter what psychologists call a flow adjacent state. You're not thinking about what happened last week or what might go wrong tomorrow. You're here, right now, folding this shirt, placing this book, lining up these jars. There's something almost spiritual about it, if you let it be. Thich Nhat Hanh, the Vietnamese Buddhist monk and mindfulness teacher, wrote about washing dishes as a form of presence. The idea that how you do anything is how you're inhabiting your life. Organizing, done with that kind of attention, becomes a practice. And then there's the part that catches people off guard: letting go of things. Because it's rarely as simple as deciding whether you use something or not. Objects carry weight, not physical weight, but emotional weight. The sweater from your ex, the books you bought when you thought you were going to become a different kind of person, your grandmother's ceramic dish that you never used but couldn't imagine not having. Each of these things is connected to a memory, an identity, a version of yourself that once felt important. Letting go of an object can feel like letting go of a story. And that's because, neurologically, it kind of is. Our brains form attachments to objects through the same mechanisms that form attachments to people. It's called the endowment effect in behavioral economics. We instinctively overvalue things simply because they belong to us, which means that decluttering, real decluttering, is never just a physical act. It's a process of grief. Small grief mostly, but grief nonetheless. You're making a conscious decision to release something that once mattered or that you once believed you needed, and there's real courage in that. Marie Kondo talks about thanking objects before letting them go, and while that might sound unusual, there's actually psychological wisdom in it. Acknowledging the role something played before releasing it helps the brain complete the emotional loop. It gives the ending a shape, and endings with shape are easier to accept than ones that just trail off. Here's something that might stop you for a second. Your space and your mental state aren't separate things. They're in constant conversation. A study published in the Personality and Social Psychology Bulletin found that people who described their homes as cluttered or full of unfinished projects were more likely to report higher levels of depressed mood and fatigue. And the reverse is also true. People who described their homes as restful and restorative showed better focus and lower stress. Your environment isn't a neutral backdrop to your life. It's an active participant in it. When you walk into a room that feels calm and intentional, your nervous system notices. When you walk into one that feels chaotic and overwhelming, it notices that too. So when you do sit down to organize, whether it's a closet, a desk drawer, or the whole apartment, what you're actually doing is making a series of quiet, meaningful choices about what your life is for. What you keep says something about what you value. What you let go of says something about who you're becoming. It's a values clarification. It's a way of asking yourself, does this still belong in my life? Does this still belong in this version of me? Those aren't small questions, they're some of the most important ones we can ask. And maybe that's the most underrated thing about tidying up. It's one of the most immediate, accessible forms of self-care that exists. You don't need an appointment. You don't need to feel ready. You just start. You clear one surface, You create one small pocket of order in the middle of a complicated life, and something in you exhales. It doesn't fix everything, but it reminds you that your environment is yours to shape, that you have agency, that you are someone who takes care of things, including yourself. If any part of this resonated with you, whether you're a compulsive cleaner or someone whose floor has been a project for months, I'd love to know. What does organizing feel like for you? Is it calming? Overwhelming? Does it help when life gets heavy? Drop a comment below. This channel is built on conversations like that. One the kind where we take the quiet, everyday things we all experience and actually understand them. If that's your kind of thing, subscribe. New videos drop every week. And in the meantime, maybe go clear off one surface. Just one. See how it feels.